Hi, my name's Dr. Danielle Crane. I'm a clinical psychologist, and about 7 years ago, I posted a video on YouTube about narrative therapy, the Tree of Life project, and it unexpectedly gained about 14,000 YouTube views and about 240,000 blog views. And I ended up with messages from people all around the world asking my advice on how to deliver it, or providing their kind of thanks and feedback on how well it was working for them, which I really appreciated. And at the same time, it did make me regret the fact that I'd filmed it sat on my bedroom floor whilst very unwell with morning sickness, and mainly just trying to not throw up. So I think it's got to the point where it's probably a good idea to re-record it as part of this new channel, go into a bit more detail about the actual approach of narrative therapy and the sort of stance that the therapist takes. I will then give you an overview of each of the sessions and how I used to deliver them, and there'll be loads of links to resources and that sort of thing below. So hopefully you find this helpful. So why don't we start by thinking about what narrative therapy actually is. So the idea is that all of us have narratives that we use to weave together the different experiences and beliefs that we have in a way that feels meaningful to us. And we will always have particular narratives that are more dominant than others. So, for example, you may have a narrative of being a victim, and that may influence the way that you kind of deal with future situations or the way that you think about yourself. And in narrative therapy, we try to take a very non-judgmental and genuinely curious approach, where we will help the person explore potential other perspectives or other stories that they may be missing. So, for example, they may realise that actually there's a narrative of perhaps them being a survivor rather than a victim of that experience. And that thinking of it in that slightly different way is more helpful for them. We don't try to kind of dictate to a person what narratives they should hold on to, because we acknowledge that the person is an expert in their own life and their own experience, and we are very much just there to help them to kind of gently explore those particular narratives. The approach also helps people to notice their strengths and skills and abilities, so that they feel that they're able to use those things if future difficulties come up. There's also a huge emphasis on externalizing the problem. So rather than thinking I'm anorexic, we might encourage people to think I have anorexia or I suffer from anorexia, and see themselves as a separate entity to that particular difficulty. The other thing about narrative therapy is it doesn't view the person in isolation. It acknowledges that they are part of a wider system. So a lot of those narratives will actually be family narratives or cultural narratives that the person is holding on to. So we try and take that into account in the sessions as well. So one of the ways of delivering narrative therapy is with the Tree of Life project. I'll link the people below who originally developed this idea and some of their videos as well. The idea is that you are working with someone drawing out a tree where each part of the tree represents some aspect of their experience. So the roots are their past experiences, the ground is their present experiences, the trunk of the tree are their coping skills and abilities and resources, the branches are their hopes for the future, the leaves are the important people in their life, the fruits or flowers are gifts that they've been given, and then you also talk about storms, which are things that could threaten their tree in some way. And when I was an assistant, I delivered this in both individual settings with children and in group settings as well, including eating disorders groups and that sort of thing, and always had very good feedback about the project. I also would often integrate elements of cognitive behavioural therapy or motivational interviewing or that sort of thing if it felt appropriate for that particular client, and I can explain how I did that. And I found that it's gives you a really good structure to the sessions. It also creates a lot of opportunity for sort of discussions, and it allows the person to be really creative in how they're kind of expressing things. And the main thing I found was also that often people are really anxious about talking to a therapist, or, you know, if they've got autism or things like that, they might really struggle with direct kind of face-to-face conversation, and actually having a shared activity where you are both kind of looking at something on the desk and talking about it whilst engaging in activity tended to be much easier for them. You know, I've never done this with a client and have them sort of not be willing to engage or that sort of thing. It worked really well at helping them to kind of open up a bit. So I'll go through each of the stages. So I would usually start with the roots, moving up to the ground, trunk of the tree, branches, leaves, flowers, and then talking about storms. But it's up to you what order you would like to do it in. Also, I was in a service where I was restricted to 6 sessions, but you are welcome to take as many sessions as you need. When starting with the roots of the tree, these symbolise the person's past and where they've come from. And it's easiest if you turn the page on its side and write the life events as a timeline down the one side. It's up to the person what events they consider to be significant. So it can include both traumatic events as well as things that they're very proud of or achievements in their life. And whilst obviously going through those events, it gives you an opportunity to talk to the person about the different narratives that might have been around at that time, both their personal narratives and wider sort of family or societal narratives, and thinking about any changes that there have been in those particular narratives throughout their life, how that's affected the way that they've dealt with different situations and that sort of thing. So once you've written out your timeline, you can go around each item with a coloured pen to make the shape of the roots. It's up to the client if they want to do the writing and drawing themselves, or if they would like you to do it for them and they just pick the colours and style. I also have a template of a tree on one of my worksheets that you can use if you need some more help with this. The roots of the tree will then connect to the base of the tree trunk, and there's going to be space on either side for the ground. The ground represents the person's current day-to-day life, and that can include both symptoms of their mental health difficulties, as well as hobbies and interests and people they're spending their time with. It is also a good opportunity to sometimes draw in elements of cognitive behaviour therapy in terms of helping the person understand some of the cycles that they might be stuck in. So, for example, if someone's anxious and they're avoiding certain situations, as a result of that, it provides them with temporary relief and at the same time makes anxiety worse in the longer term. I do have a CBT worksheet that you can use to explain to people the basic ideas of CBT and things like that in more detail. We then move on to the trunk of the tree. The lower half, I tend to do coping skills. So with the coping skills, you will initially ask the client what skills they currently use, both helpful and unhelpful. So it might be that the client listens to music to try and relax themselves, or it might be that they're self-harming as a way of trying to distract themselves from their feelings. So you can then, with their permission, offer suggestions of additional or alternative coping skills that they can start trying to use, and you can teach them how to actually apply each of those skills. I do have worksheets available that you can give to clients explaining a wide variety of different coping skills that they can try. Then the top half of the tree, we are going to be thinking about their abilities and strengths and different roles they take and that sort of thing. So I will normally write their name in the middle of that section and then write the qualities around. Some people struggle to identify positive qualities that they have, so they might need a lot of support with this section. And sometimes the way that I found most helpful is asking them to collect compliment slips before the session, which means that they ask friends and family to write 3 things that they like about the client and put them in a sealed envelope. The client then brings the envelope to the session and we open them together and read all of the things that people have said about them. And it tends to be quite a moving session in terms of people actually reflecting on the alternative narratives that there are about them, and helping them to think of those different perspectives as well. Then I tend to move on to the branches of the tree, which represent the person's hopes and goals for the future. So these might be things that are related to therapy in terms of wanting to manage their mental health in a different way. It might be things that are completely unrelated, like getting a particular career or achieving other things in their life. So each goal is written on one of the branches, and it's an opportunity to sometimes bring in elements of motivational interviewing in terms of helping them think about where they are now compared to where they would like to be, what steps they might need to take to get them there, what barriers might be in the way. If they feel that they are 3 out of 10 in terms of their progress to get there, what would it take for them to be 4 out of 10? Like, what small differences would they need to be? And that's the thing. And I'll make an entire separate video on motivational interviewing techniques, as these can be helpful for any goal, but particularly helping people who are perhaps ambivalent about recovery. The next part of the tree, we are thinking about people in the client support network. So this can include friends and family, teachers, therapists, pets. It can include people who've passed away. It can also include inspirational figures or their favourite writer, anyone that's sort of had an influence in the client's life. And when we're talking about each of those people, we'll obviously be talking about the relationship they have with them, the narratives around those particular relationships. And sometimes I encourage people to actually write a letter to someone important in their life. They don't need to actually give it to the person. Sometimes writing it is therapeutic in itself. But as a way of actually being able to express how they feel, the things that perhaps they're grateful for, the things that they have been hurt by, and that can be a very useful exercise. Another exercise I sometimes use at this point is something called a family sculpt, which involves the person picking an object to represent themselves and to represent each important person in their life, and then they place the items on the table to indicate how close they feel to each person and their relationship with the person. So, whether their mum is, right by their side and their dad's at the edge of the table, and that sort of thing can end up showing quite a lot about the relationship. Sometimes they also pick an object to represent the mental health difficulty itself, and how that impacts their relationship with other people, which links in very nicely with the narrative therapy idea of externalizing your mental health difficulties and seeing them as a separate entity in themselves. I'll make a separate video about family sculpts because they are really interesting and can be really useful in a number of ways. As you can see, I've now moved on to flowers on the tree. You can also use fruits or nuts or whatever the client chooses, and these just represent gifts that the person has been given, both material and sort of qualities that they have. So it might be they have their dad's sense of humour, or it might be their mum gave them a special necklace, or their friend gives great hugs. Anything like that we would count as a gift. And then I tend to end the project talking about storms, which are things that may come up in the near future that are likely to be difficult for the client. For example, a relationship breakup or deterioration in their mental health. We have a think about what things they could do to manage that situation, including creating a crisis plan of their coping skills, important people that they can contact, their strengths, coping statements, that sort of thing. I have a worksheet that you can use that really simply lays that out on one side of A4 paper. And some people will share their trees with other people. It gives them an opportunity to start sharing that new story that perhaps they've developed about their life. And when we used to do this in a group setting, we would stick all the trees up on the wall to create almost a forest, and help the person to see that they are not alone. They are part of this forest of other people with similar experiences who are there to support them as well. So I'm hoping that's given you a good overview of the sessions. Do feel free to use the resources linked below or comment with any questions that you might have. And I will also write a blog post summarising all of this. So I hope that's been helpful. And I'll see you all again soon.